You're listening to the More Than a Worship Leader podcast. Here's your host, Gary Durbin.
Welcome to the More Than a Worship Leader podcast, where we talk about worship ministry in the local church. Today with me is Phil Sillas. Phil's career spans over 32 years in the music business. Phil is a veteran of the Christian music industry, a Dove Award-winning producer and songwriter, as well as former vice president of Maranatha Music and former A&R Director for Song Discovery, Worship Leader Magazine. He and his wife, Karen, live in beautiful California, and they have one son named Andre. So, Phil, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Did I get all that stuff right?
Yeah, man, it sounded good.
That's some good credentials, man. It's a lot for me to say.
No, it's been a charmed life. I'm very blessed, blessed guy.
Yeah, man. You and I go back quite a ways to worship leader conferences.
Were you like at the first one? We did like two in Austin. Our first two were in Austin.
Yeah, I don't know if I was at the first one, but I was at one of those in Austin for sure.
Those are fun.
Yeah, and you were always a part of the songwriting panels, because I was a aspiring worship songwriter in the 2000s, and so those were very formative times for me. Sitting under those the pressure packed panels. So you it was pretty intense. You guys would play if you got a song submitted, they would play your song in front of everyone, and you're just watching the panel listen to it, kind of like Simon Cowell, and then afterwards get the feedback.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, I think the heart of it was in the right place. And we met a lot of great writers like as yourself, and it's been fun to watch everybody just kind of over the years progress and land really great worship leader gigs, and see songs of theirs popping up on CCLI and stuff. So it was fun. It was a fun time.
Yeah. And I think probably our deepest connection has to do with the Celtics and Lakers rivalry. Would you agree?
I agree. Yeah.
Every time I'd see Phil at the conference, I just say, "Go Celtics,"
Yeah, there was that year when we won. I don't know if did you come out west when we were in Albuquerque, and it was Celtics Lakers in the finals, and it was Game 7. And
no, I'm glad I didn't see you that year.
Yeah, and what was funny about that was Israel Houghton had to go on, and we're all sitting in the green room watching the game. Yeah, so
that's fun. Well, let's kick this off by you telling us about your journey through worship ministry and even the music business.
Sure. Well, it started. I mean, I grew up very early on doing music, and in high school I had my first publishing deal, which was a secular deal, and I was I grew up in Los Angeles, and so I had no idea there was Christian music. I mean, growing up in LA, it's like didn't even know that was a thing. And it wasn't until I don't know, I was probably in my early 20s, a friend of mine that I had gone to high school, she was a Christian and she was a really good singer, and she said, "Hey, I need you to produce a demo for me." And I'm like, "Okay." She goes, "I need you to write some songs." And I'm like, "But I don't know what that means, So she sent me some things, and I'm like, "Man, this is really good." I mean, I think there was sent me some Russ Taff medals, and a couple of things that were in the lane that I was in, kind of the R&B thing. So she goes, "Yeah, just write." And I was a believer. It's just that I didn't know that there was this Christian music industry. So anyways, wrote a couple of songs. We did this demo, and then like about a couple weeks later, I get a call from a Word Records, and I'm like, huh. And they're like, hey, we're, so and so, and we love one of your songs, and we'd love for one of our artists to record it. And I'm like, oh, that's great. And they're like, have you ever heard of Kim Boyce? And I'm like, no, really haven't. But so long story short, that got me, they brought me as a writer at Word Records. And that's when I started to learn about the Christian industry, and but more CCM and stuff, and kind of stayed in that lane for a pretty long time, producing and writing and stuff. And uh, around 2001, I think I got a call from Maranatha Records, and they were looking for an A&R director to take over the record division and kind of take them into their next period, because they had been so associated with all the great worship stuff. So I was like, I didn't know about Maranatha, to be honest. And so did a crash course, and they threw me into the throes of Promise Keepers. It's like, okay, so we have this band, the Promise Keepers worship band, and we want you to produce their records. And I was like, okay. And that's when I met like Tommy Walker and Paul Balash and all of these just worship leaders, and scared the pants off of me just how, amazing these guys were, and anointed in their writing, and then to see them lead worship. And it was just this whole new thing that I was introduced to. And so that's how I got into the worship world, and had a lot of fun at Maranatha. Thought, I feel like we made some really great records, and I was able to bring some people in from my world into the worship world, and that was a lot of fun. And after that, I was offered the position over at Worship Leader Magazine to do song discovery for them. And that I was kind of excited about that, because originally being a songwriter and getting back into songwriting and working with songwriters and stuff, I was like, did that. And at that time, what that meant, it was giving an opportunity for the song, not so much the name recognition of a songwriter.
Right,
so,
right.
Finding these guys in the middle of America that just had these incredible songs that were birthed out of their church, and being able to have a platform that other worship leaders could have access to them and stuff. And it was really very rewarding time. And I just I did that. And then my wife and we were living in Orange County for years, and our son went off to college, and we were empty nesters, and it's like, let's head up to the Central Coast. We've always loved it, and my wife has family there. And so we made the big move, and I commuted a lot. The first couple of years, commuted back and forth to LA and back, and then to Nashville, and then settled into our community a little bit more. And I was offered a worship director at a little church in Morro Bay, California, and it's just been a blast, doing that, being able to do that, and then continue to work in the industry, but a little more on the Christian Latin thing, which has always been a passion of mine, is to help outfit the Spanish church as well. So I'm at a place right now where I get to do both, and I'm just really, really happy about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So do I remember correctly, did you back in the day write some jingles?
Yeah, I did.
And was one of those jingles the famous clapper?
It was, yeah.
I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. So, I mean, what?
Yeah.
So how much time went into that jingle, the clapper?
So there was this, I was living in Sacramento and I had a studio there and I had a partner and we were doing jingles for like ad agencies, like car jingles, and car dealers, and furniture and all this stuff. There was this one agency out of San Francisco and these guys would bring us, uh, we need a jingle for, the garden weasel. We need a jingle for the charbecue, and then they came with the clapper, and they had, it was interesting. They had shot the commercial, but there was no music under it. And so this was before MIDI, so we had to like write this clap on, clap off thing and match these people, like there was an old lady in their bed clapping and the like. So, and their whole thing was like, we need it to be so bad it's memorable.
Yeah.
That was their, that was their criteria. And the other one that I did for them was the Chia Pet, and it was the same thing.
Oh, chia, 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 chia.
Chia, yeah. And
Yeah.
they're like, the first one I gave them, it was like, no, this is too good. No, no, no. We need it to just be like, and so I'm like, all right. And I just kind of like found the just the, the most dumbest sounds on my synthesizer and
Mm.
the crummiest drum sounds on my drum machine, and called a friend, a female singer, and it's like, hey, come and sing this for me. That became Chia Pet. So yeah,
Man, that's some major monumental tunes there for pop culture, bro.
yeah,
That's awesome. Wow, that's cool. That's cool.
so,
Well, today, and by the way, if anyone's listening to this that is like millennial or Gen Z or whatever, just stay tuned to the end of the podcast and you'll hear what we're talking about. All right. So,
great.
all right. Well, today I want to talk about the business of worship music because I feel like you have seen and experienced both sides of things and maybe even a good balance. So you're a worship leader, but you're also been in the music business. And I think as I observe it, it has the potential to help ministry,
Yeah,
and it also may have the potential to hinder it when it comes to corporate worship in the local church.
yeah.
So, especially as we look at the boom of the worship genre over the last few decades, I know my first exposure was Darlene Check, Shout to the Lord,
Yeah.
back in the late '90s. That was massive. When you look at the worship boom, where do you see it starting?
Um, yeah, I think, um, well, knowing Maranatha's history, I think Maranatha and integrity, that was kind of the start on a real grassroots kind of um, level. The I Love You Lords and the Don Moen songs and stuff. So
Majesty.
Majesty and yeah, and
Yeah.
so I think that sparked the whole shift in worship music in the church, bringing guitars and drums and bass and all into the sanctuary. Um, but I think when CCLI started, that really kind of became the glue for and the way that everyone was able to talk and share within different denominations and churches. And so I think it was about there. Yeah, but yeah, shout to the Lord. I remember being at Maranatha and shout to the Lord and Lord, I lift your name on high, which was a Maranatha copyright. Shout to the Lord was an integrity copyright.
Mm.
And it was 1 and 2 for years.
Oh
Those were,
yeah.
you know, and
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's when I cut my teeth, man. That was a cool time.
yeah,
It was very inspiring for sure, as a young worship leader. So how do you think the popularity and the boom of the worship genre has helped to the church and helped corporate worship? Or still is?
yeah. Um, Well, I mean, I think as the distribution game has changed, before it was like, um, you just songs that local churches would get would be dictated by the top, by the record labels. So whether it was, um, worship together, or integrity, or whoever, it was like those were the songs that we had the most access to. And now with, you know, with the record stores gone, with CDs gone, but now we have streaming. It's just opened it up for. It's just kind of leveled the playing field, um, and it's made it a lot easier for songs to find their way when maybe 10 or 15 years ago they wouldn't have had a chance. You know, outside of their local church, or a songwriter or worship writer. It's like not having the opportunity, having to wait a year before a song got a shot to even get on a wow worship or whatever, whatever the big
Right.
thing was and stuff. So it's an exciting time. There's so much music out there, and it's like I know every Friday morning I'm listening to all the new songs that are out, and then cross checking them with, okay, for my team, are they on loop community? Are they on multi-tracks? If
Mm.
there's a song I feel like we should start, so there's much more available. And I think it's very helpful. I'm approaching it because I'm at a very small church of volunteers.
Mm.
So this is a great time for us small church people, because there's so much available to us that help us, you know, uh, put together a really nice worship set every Sunday.
And you're talking about helpful as in like as a small church or small worship team, there's the resources like the multi-tracks and the loop community.
Yeah,
That's big.
it's very helpful. Not only that, and then YouTube's been a big help as well. There's just a lot of um, on the how-tos. How do we do this? And yeah, it's a really great time, I think.
Mhm.
You know, but like
Yeah.
but it could also be a dangerous time too. So
Yeah, let's talk about that. Like
yeah,
where do you see the danger where do you see that it has or has the potential to hinder in ministry and corporate worship?
yeah. As someone who's played an instrument all my life, I mean, like clicks and stems are fairly a new thing to me, as in terms of implementing them into a service of worship. Every church that I've played at or attended, it was none of that. We had none of that. It was like, and that was really good. I thought that just sharpened us. Um, unfortunately, I feel like with the music in our schools, that's pretty much non-existent anymore. You have these kids that are coming up that want to play, and there's no jazz bands, there's no bands, there's no garage bands, or what I mean. So they're basically learning with playing in ears, to stems, and that's scary to me because, man, a computer crashes or goes down, it's like they're deer in headlights, and that's where it can get uh that's where it can get dangerous, where you rely on it so much that if somebody calls an audible, they're like, well, no, we can't do that, and that saddens me, because that's the beauty of music and worship, is to be able to.
Hmm. And
Like,
do you see a correlation with the use of clicks and tracks to the music business? Like when you are we using all these things because of the boom of all that?
um yeah, I think it I mean, the sad part is, the people in the congregation are so tuned to what they hear on the radio. And so, and that's not sad, that's good. But, there's a tendency to, like, okay, well, let's try and sound as close to the record as we can. That's just, and um and on, and every church is different on how they approach it, but some churches I feel rely too heavily on the tracks and the stems that they get.
because they want it to sound like the recording.
Sound like the recording.
And then
Yeah.
it leads to the question of why.
Right.
And that,
Uh,
yeah, and
yeah,
that I think that question is what kind of leads us down the path of, it's good to ask that question, and
it-
it's like, why? What's the motive and what's the reason?
well, I mean, I think part of it, part of it is, we want to play our best. We want to play skillfully. And, you know, and we don't want worship to be a distraction. And when I mean a distraction, it's like, a band that's not, um, you know, that's just kind of, hey, let's just jam, let's just see what happens. And I just feel like someone sitting in a congregation that's a little distracting. It's like, I think at the core of it, we want to lead the congregation in worship, prepare their hearts for sermon, the message and stuff. And so with the least amount of distractions, whether it be audio, vocally, or guitars out of tune, or what I mean, it's like that's the kind of stuff that can derail a Sunday worship service. So I think, it's kind of maybe like Photoshop. It's like, hey, this is pretty cool. And then the more you dive into it, it's like, I don't even look like myself, but I look great, I
Yeah,
mean, it's
yeah.
there, and so,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah. Well, I
but
think,
I
go ahead.
think
I'm
it,
sorry.
right. I'm sorry. Yeah. I think it does make, done right. I feel like it makes musicians better players at the end of the day,
How
because,
so? Yeah, talk about
because
that.
you're like, drummers are now like, with a metronome, and um same with any instrument. It's just like, okay, it helps our time, it helps our uh understanding of song structure. So I think that's real important. I mean, and those are things that you and I maybe learned when we were coming up the old way, which was playing in a garage, or playing with bands, or playing without that stuff. You just learn that. This is kind of doing the same thing, but a different way of teaching it, you know? And so I think that is good. I mean, I,
Mhm.
I think that's very helpful.
Yeah, I see that for sure. We're dipping into a little bit of the idea of musicianship. I know a mutual friend of ours, Tony Guerrero, was on the podcast last year talking about that. So if you haven't heard that, go check that out. But he was a real big proponent of the idea of churches really getting back to the idea of becoming better musicians. And what I hear you saying is, in a way, that the way that it's helped the church, the music business, how it's really um, come into our worship services. I think it has, as we've listened to these professional musicians, it's pushed us to try to go to that level.
Well, where I would push back with my dear friend Tony is, when I lived in Los Angeles, it was like, you had you had 5 players for every position. You had access to that. Great musicians and stuff all around. And the bigger the church, the bigger the pool of players. Well, the best the best thing that's happened to me is coming to a church. We're 300-400. We're in a beach community. My team is volunteers. I have that start at the age of 16 all the way to the late 60s. And all at, different levels of musicianship. And that's what I have to work with. So 2 things I need to have happen. One, I need to create a Sunday a service where we're playing and executing music at at the best we can. And the second thing is to not stress out the musicians on the team,
Right.
this like, oh, I hope we start at the same time and end it. So I was like, I can no, I think we can do much better than that. And these tools help us get there. And I've gotten to a point now with my team where we're starting to do some services without any clicks or any, pad stems or whatever. It's just like, okay, guys, we're going commando, man, let's go and do it. And but it takes a while to get there. And when you're dealing with smaller churches, that maybe don't have a great drummer or don't have a bass player and stuff, I think they're really, really helpful, and it helps the team win on a Sunday.
Well, certainly the music business has helped the church, has helped worship ministries for sure. There's also dangers like we talked about. I think one area that I see the dual nature of helping and hindering is in songwriting, because I've experienced the helping and the hindering even in my own personal songwriting. So I remember, and you're part of this journey too, back in the worship leader conference days and songwriting panels. And I just remember starting out as a young songwriter, writing worship songs for my church and seeing people grab them, and then moving on to, different conferences, picking up my songs or whatever. And when that stuff started happening, then I started getting the taste of, oh, what could happen
Right.
with my songs. And what was instrumental for me to keep myself healthy was at a worship leader magazine. At the back of one of their editions, Matt Redman had done an article about this. And I don't know if you recall this, but he said something that really struck me and has stuck with me. He said, I do these concerts, these worship concerts all over the country. And at every concert, I'll have a worship leader run up to me and give me a CD.
Mhm.
And he said, for some reason, I just don't think they're trying to bless me. I think they're trying to get me to help them get famous.
Yeah.
And he ended it by saying, whatever happened to the joy of just writing songs for our local church to
Yeah.
sing?
Absolutely.
And that struck me hard, because when I first started writing songs for my church to sing, that was the farthest thing from my mind, was it going outside of the walls of my church. I was just like nervous to put it in front of my congregation and see if they would catch it.
Yeah.
So I said all that to say, and to set up the question of, just giving advice for aspiring songwriters in the church, because we know it's a good thing to write a new song. But how do we as worship leaders, especially in this day and age, stay healthy and stay balanced in that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a great line. It's like, what could happen? I mean, we see that so much on social media, and a lot of times what could happen really doesn't happen. But getting back to songwriting, I mean, I think it's real important that songwriters are engaged in a local community, local church. And that's what we're called to do, is to be the voice of our church. Like I look out every Sunday and I can see, and I've done life with a vast majority of my congregation. Not on a day-to-day thing, but it's like, at certain periods, like who's going through health issues, or who's having, financial issues, or who's having, being um, you see these faces and you see this community. And in a lot of ways, what we as a worship team is, we're the voice and the heart cry for our congregation. So to me, I've never heard, I mean, maybe rare, occasionally you'll hear of like some great songwriters getting in a room and go, let's write a hit worship song. It doesn't happen. They, oh,
Mm.
More often than not, I would venture to say 99% of the time, those songs that we sing on Sundays were birthed out of a local church.
Mm.
And local could be, my little church, or it could be, uh, Elevation. I don't know, but it's birthed out of what's going on there. So as a songwriter, um, that's where the inspiration is like, God has me here right now, and I am a songwriter. You are the voice of your congregation.
Mm.
And so it's from that the songs are birthed. And a lot of times, what I'm seeing more happening is, especially with younger writers, it's like, man, let's get an Airbnb and let's go off for a day or two. Let's just write. Let's just see. Let's just be in prayer. Let's write. Let's see what God, what we can come up. What's happening in your church, or what's happening in our church? What's on our hearts? What needs to be sung about? What season are we in? And that's so inspiring to me. I mean, it's a great time to be a songwriter, because you literally could write a song, record it on your laptop,
Mm.
and have it send the link to the congregation in a week.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's amazing,
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, I just feel like if a song will find its way,
Mm.
based on no, I don't know how that happens, how it does. I have a sense. I mean, I know God breathes on things, and it just, creates it. The song Waymaker was recorded in Spanish by a Priscilla Bueno. At the time, was a worship leader at a small church in Las Vegas. Something ridiculous like 50 million YouTube views later in Spanish. You know what I mean? It's just like, but her heart was just like, I'm just going to record this for my congregation. But that's, and so if you can just stay grounded in that, and I feel like having a good relationship with your pastor, that is encouraging, but yet let's not lose sight of what we're doing,
Mm.
And that's always been, lately, that's been great for me with my relationship with my current pastor, is that, we touch base every week, and it's, and I'm always like, yeah, the team's boom, boom, boom. And he's like, okay, that's great.
Mm.
But let's stay grounded. And that's really good for me, because I just get so excited working on, I mean, I just love music. I love playing. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it's good to not lose sight of why it is we're doing what we're doing. So I would just really encourage songwriters today to stay grounded in the local church. And if Matt Redman's going to hear your song, he's going to hear it. You know what I mean? It's going to, the pitching of worship songs is a weird thing to me. And pop songs, I totally get it. The radio, but it's like,
So yeah, talk about that. Why is that weird?
um, just because, to me, how sacred worship music is. It's like, and a service of worship is a time of prayer. It's a time of worship. It's a time of praise. It's a time of lamenting. It's, and to try and like monetize that, it just feels weird to me, as opposed to, it's like, hey man, I got the next Mercy song, Mercy Me song. I'm gonna go pitch that to them,
Yeah.
because it's a whole different thing. It's like radio, you know, that I have no problem sitting down with a songwriter, but sitting in a songwriting room with another songwriter and going, let's write a worship song that like we could get to Chris Tomlin.
Mm.
It just seems, yeah, I think once you start putting commerce on worship, it just feels weird to me. I
Yeah.
just think that the songs will find their way in the church if they're birthed out of a local church, there's a really good chance that other churches are experiencing that same season as well,
Yeah.
and that, like, certain songs just resonate.
Yeah. I love the idea of motives and keeping those in check when it comes to worship music, it comes to corporate worship. Our church and the worship team that I lead has had an amazing season of growth, and we've attracted a lot of talent, and it's been awesome. It's been fun to lead this crew. And we have these worship nights a couple times a year. And then I've also been able to hire a tech director a few years ago that I found that is really good at recording,
That's
at,
great.
at producing. And
Yeah,
it wasn't even on the job description. It was just kind of more of a thing like, oh man, he's actually really good at this.
yeah,
And that came out of the COVID season and figuring that out. And then as we got into worship nights, he started multi-tracking them, from the front
yeah,
of house. And a couple years ago, I was like, hey, what if we put like a EP out for our church of our versions of these songs,
yeah,
which was great. And we did that. Um, but we had to check our motives immediately because if we're not careful, we can go into each worship night thinking about the recording
yeah,
as
exactly.
opposed to the moment, as opposed to the experience. And that's been really key for us checking our motives, even as songwriters for the church. If we're sitting even alone and we're writing a song and it's a worship song for
Right.
corporate worship, and we're thinking more about getting it out as opposed to putting it in front of our congregation, yeah, that might get us in trouble.
Yep, absolutely. I totally agree. Yeah, there is a fine line because as you want to keep your team engaged and growing, and recording one of the is a great way to do that.
The best, right?
Yeah. And in fact, we did a EP this year, just our team, of versions of songs that we do, but the way we do them. And it was a blast. It was an absolute blast because it was the first time that a lot of these people had ever been in a studio or recorded, but it really brought the team together even closer, I feel, you know, and in a good way, and it blessed the congregation,
Mm.
you know, like here's us,
Yeah,
you know, this is our church. And we were able to do, technology allowed us to do that, where we couldn't have done it 10 years ago,
right.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
yeah, but it's real important to keep it in check and understanding, you know, the individuals. It's like I have very talented, I'm blessed with four great drummers, go figure. It's
that's
great.
awesome.
Yeah. But all four of them know on any given Sunday, it's like, okay, we're gonna, just because of the word that, our pastor's preaching on and stuff, I feel like this worship Sunday is going to be sorry guys, I'm gonna need you just to be doing, percussion and light stuff, and they're like, yeah, we're here to serve that.
Oh,
And
that's great.
yeah, and I don't, I've been really fortunate that I haven't had somebody go, hey man, I don't feel like I'm singing lead enough,
Mm,
that kind of thing. Or I don't, why I need, on the recording, there's a guitar solo. I think I should do, you know what I mean? We don't have any of that. And I think it's just staying, it's like, this is what we do on Sunday, keeping that in check. You know, the other stuff, if it happens, it happens. And I feel like that's really just, God breathing on it a little bit. But that's like, to your point, that's not why we should do it. That's where we can get into trouble. And as to me, and maybe it's my old Catholic guilt, but it's like as a worship director, it's like I got to answer for what goes on, and I don't want that. I mean, I don't want that kind of thing going on where it's like, we're putting too much attention on ourselves and not about serving our church as a worship, so yeah.
yeah, I think it was in the same article with Matt Redman. He talks about that where he circles around to the idea of, but if your song is going to get out, let the Lord do it.
Yeah.
And the Lord is like way better than any like record company or way more influential.
Yeah.
And if he wants a song to impact the global church, he'll do that without a
Right.
record company if need be. So
And, as a writer, I, if I, s- and I rarely, I don't bring my songs to the congregation because that's a weird thing too. It's just like, here's a new one I wrote, but on those rare occasions when you throw something in that you've written because you feel like, I think, and, and I see somebody maybe midway in the congregation, their hands raised up in tears or whatever. It's like that to me is that's it.
that's right.
That's I mean, and um
That's the joy right there.
it really is, it's
Yeah,
just like I was able to be her voice or his voice or or was
right.
able
Yeah,
to
it was Rich Mullins, guitarist, and I should have this quote like on my computer so I don't quit messing it up, but it says something to the effect of artists are so important because we express the inexpressible
yeah.
or express what other people cannot express. And it
Mhm.
gives them a way to express it. And the songs do that so well.
Yeah. And the scary word there is important. It's how you put how we, what does that mean to me or what, and I was like, that's dangerous, and man, that's like what the enemy wants is to like, let's mess with the egos, you know.
Yeah, and as worship leaders, we have to lead the way in
Yeah,
having right motives
right.
because as our team gets better, as songs start rising up within our church, it's well, I shouldn't say it's up to us, but it's up to us to lead and
Mhm.
to be an example
Yeah,
for our team and the culture that we set to have the right motives. So that's
yeah,
important.
yeah. And it's like I didn't start leading worship until maybe, wow, okay, now I'm dating myself, but probably 20 years ago. But
Mm,
I was an old guy at that point too, and it was because it's like this is a heavy thing. It's not just leading a song. It's this is a real important thing. And so I was always the reluctant worship leader,
mm,
not because I couldn't sing or lead or play in a band. It was this is just a very big responsibility. And
mm,
I played in churches, my community for, I don't know, the last 35 years or whatever, because I feel that's important to contribute.
mm,
But, you know, leading's a whole nother thing. And I pray for a lot of these young worship leaders, these kids.
yeah,
Man, it's a lot we're putting on them, you
yeah.
know. And I've seen that when I was working in CCM. There was a period where I was working and producing a lot of when the whole boy band craze was going on. And of course, Christian music had to go out and do their, let's find our Britney Spears, our Christian Britney Spears, or our Christian NSYNC or whatever. And man, it was so much responsibility to put on these poor kids
Mm,
at such a young age, and I feel and my prayer is that the church or our industry doesn't do the same with these young worship leaders.
mm,
Let's give them a chance to like sit under the tutelage of someone like you or, that's that can that's been around and going, look, it's a lot more than just leading a song, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and really being supportive of them, and nurturing them along the way you know, so that they can lead rather than just, go view everything as like this is a stepping stone. It's like, okay, I'm gonna lead him, I'm gonna be at this church for a year, and then but my real goal is to get to this bigger church and then
mm,
get to Nashville. I mean, and it's which is fine, but so many times you don't, it's just so important to have these youngsters grounded with, with a good mentor or, I mean, I figure, well, I'm being kept around for a reason, and maybe it's just to kind of, uh, share some wisdom and help them avoid some of the pitfalls that I've, been through in my life.
I'm grateful to know you, man, and I'm grateful to have you on this episode of the podcast.
Vice versa as well. It's been neat. That was, that's the great thing about the church is like it's kind of these worship conferences or whatever. They're like it's like golf. It's like 4 people that would never know each other all meet, same goal, and and have just a wonderful experience and stuff. And so over the years, it's like we would probably see each other once a year, and it's like, and then being able to watch, what you're doing and stuff, and it's great. Yeah,
man. Yeah, even a Celtics and Lakers fan can be brought together. Amazing. It's awesome.
I will tell you, my son went to Brandeis to get his master's, and so I got to go to Boston and visit him and stuff. It's like, all right, I get it.
Well, Phil, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Please add this to your podcast list, review it, and share it with others. And don't forget about Gary's books, More Than a Worship Leader and More Than a Band, available on Amazon today.
There's a new pet.
Chia.
Chia Pet, the pottery that grows. It's fun and easy.
Clap on, clap off, clap on, clap off, the clapper.